My name is Siobhan. I'm seeing a lot of familiar names in here, so I've met a lot of you, and it's exciting to meet those of you that I haven't before. I am about to be a senior at Cornell, but my family is from Lansing, so I've lived in the area for a little while, and I've been involved with Sunrise for the past two to three-ish years. And so today we're just going to do a little overview of the organization and our history, which I think a lot of you will be sort of familiar with, but also talk about how it works at the national level and what our ongoing work is. Isia, do you want to introduce yourself?
I'm Isia. I'm a rising senior at Ithaca High School, and I've been moving around the past few years, but I did do some work at Sunrise when I was younger, just when the Green New Deal was getting passed, and I've been involved the last few months.
Awesome. So as I'm sure many of you are familiar with, Sunrise Ithaca was sort of formed around this push to get an Ithaca Green New Deal passed. That was the major reason that people were organizing and formed this group, and held a ton of rallies, worked on town halls, did tons of public comments, outreach with Common Council and the mayor's office, which was prior to my time. And we're ultimately successful in getting the Ithaca Green New Deal adopted in June of 2019. And I'm, again, sure that all of you are very familiar with the Ithaca Green New Deal, but just as a short little recap is that the two main goals of the Ithaca Green New Deal are reaching carbon neutrality by 2030. And the second piece is doing so in a manner that is equitable and reduces inequalities in social, historic, and economic ways. And that has sort of been the piece, briefly, that has sort of been the piece that we have been most focused on in our work in the past years, because it is one thing to get the city to promise to do these things and a whole other game to get them to implement them. And reducing inequity, as we know, is quite a abstract sort of nebulous idea that could be difficult to find ways to actually implement that practically. So that has sort of been our focus moving forward after we got the Ithaca Green New Deal passed. So in the past few years, we had worked on making comments when the Ithaca Energy Code supplement was being discussed. We've done a lot of political campaigning. So Sunrise has been very supportive of the Solidarity Slate, which is comprised of the Ithaca Tenants Union, the DSA, and the Working Families Party. And we feel that historically those candidates have been aligned with our interests. So we've done lots of campaign work for them, doing canvassing, trying to build excitement around those candidates. We last year did a bit of a campaign for getting the city to declare a climate emergency. And the reason for doing that was attempting to get 24/7 carbon-free energy sort of established within, just codified within the city legislation. We were also asking for tenant protections in light of the electrification program, and wanting to prioritize making sure that electrification is not pushing tenants out and increasing rent beyond what they're able to afford. And also wanting to improve forums for community input. We now have the Sustainability and Climate Justice Advisory Commission, which is sort of, in some ways fulfills that goal that we had of trying to get more community input. Of course, outreach efforts are very ongoing. We've done a lot of relationship building with community organizations in trying to prioritize interaction with other groups like TCCPI and making sure that we're being communicative with the other groups that are in the area, because there are so many wonderful ones that are doing excellent work. Trying to do educational events. So we did a really cool webinar last winter on the intersection of climate justice and Indigenous sovereignty, which I felt went really well and was really wonderful to hear perspectives of Indigenous members in our community. We've also done some work of tapping into statewide campaigns. So we did some rallying around the CCIA a few years ago. This past year, we did some work around the Climate Jobs and Justice package. So sort of collaborating with the legislation that New York Renews is pushing at the statewide level has been something we have provided support for, but haven't necessarily been doing huge organizing efforts around. And as I said previously, our big overarching emphasis has just been generally the equitable implementation of the Ithaca Green New Deal, and the various forms that might take. And I am going to pass it over to Isia.
So what's been going on at Sunrise National? So there hasn't been that much going on, but as of recently, there has been a demand to declare a climate emergency, calling Biden to declare this emergency so that legislation can be enacted and that things can actually happen without having to go through Congress. And obviously, we are in a climate emergency crisis, and we can see that right now with the heat waves across the country, the flooding, the air quality, and that's been a reality for a while. And not only would this be symbolic because a climate emergency and any sort of federal emergency gets public attention, it would also allow unlocking millions for climate disaster relief, allowing the president to allocate funds to renewable energy investments, public housing and transportation funding. And then with that comes also combating the public health crisis that's emerging from the climate crisis and creating new good paying green jobs. And so there is a petition that you can sign. I could put that in the chat maybe later, and that would be to declare this climate emergency. Next slide, please. Okay, and so on top of this, Sunrise National has declared demands that are directed to the executive authority of President Biden. Some of these are ending the practice of leasing public lands and water for fossil fuel production, stopping the issue of permits for any new fossil fuel infrastructure, updating and strengthening outdated standards limiting particulate matter, ozone, CO2, sulfur dioxide, and other emissions, as well as lead and copper rules to prevent the contamination of our drinking water, which is a pretty big issue nationally. And then also finalizing new methane standards for new and existing oil and gas operations, and also to direct the EPA to designate greenhouse pollutants as a criteria air pollutants and set science-based national pollution cap under the Clean Air Act. We can go on to the next slide. And so Sunrise National has been involving a lot in changing, and basically now they're calling it Sunrise 2.0, and they've created a new democratic structure. Sunrise National was realizing that it was very fragmented and there wasn't much of a unity between all the hubs across the country. And so this new democratic structure urges hubs to have more power and to really have local action so that we get direct representation of the people that are impacted. And there's this idea that the government tries to make seem the people powerless, and as if they're irrelevant, and this structure aims to do the opposite of that and to give people power, and to also get public interest and get public approval of what's going on. And so there will be a delegate body that will make decisions on regions. So hubs are usually like a city, and a chapter can cover a region. And so in this delegate body, there will be decision making regarding also the volunteer leadership team and on national campaigns. And the volunteer leadership team is a bigger team, but it's still pretty small. And it aims at having a very diverse body Because one thing that Sunrise has noticed from its past action is that it is not diverse. It was mostly white-led for a long time, and that's not going to work if we're going to fight for climate justice. We need representation. And in the idea of this, there's also the aim to get the delegate body to be diverse, so we don't just have a volunteer leadership team that's diverse, because that would be tokenizing. And so, yeah, next slide. And so there are campaigns that are national, but they're decided nationally, but they're oriented and actually led locally in hubs or chapters. So there's the Green New Deal for communities, which I'll talk about more later, and the Green New Deal for schools. And then the only potential federal campaign that's going on or will be going on would be the federal campaign for the 2024 elections. And in that regards, Sunrise would push for policies and demand of candidates to have such policies and also make endorsements. And then whoever gets elected, they will push for them to and hold them accountable for the policies that they demand. You can go on to the next slide. Okay, so Green New Deal for communities, as described by Sunrise National, is the idea to build people power, disrupt the status quo, and achieve local wins that set us up to win national Green New Deal policies that meet the scale of the crisis we face. So for some communities, that will look like just getting a Green New Deal, but in Ithaca, we already have a Green New Deal that's been adopted. And so what it really means for us is for that implementation. And in our work for Sunrise, what we've been really looking towards implementing is Justice 50. I'm sure you've heard of it all, but just as a reminder, it is the idea of investing 50% of the funds that are made towards climate energy investments to climate justice communities, which are the populations that have been historically and are still today marginalized. And so we're waiting on criteria to be established, which the Climate Justice and Sustainability Advisory Board is working on. And then as part of this Green New Deal for community, we're looking to build the Climate Action Plan, which the Climate Justice Advisory Committee is also working on. As part of that, the Justice 50 could be part of it. And in that regard, there's also the idea of creating a climate resilience plan, because the climate crisis is obviously impacting our communities, and we're looking to see how we can support the communities in the way they're impacted. And that we're also trying to get the input of the community, and our goal is to do more public outreach and getting more thoughts and hearing the voices of the people of our community. You can go on to the next slide. And so to do that, one of the things we're looking forward to do is door-to-door canvassing. We know that when we approach people, we're more likely to have their time and they're more likely to be available rather than making them come to us. And if we are going to build people power, we need to go up to people, and we want to hear the concerns and the needs of the residents. Especially right now, one of the things we're looking forward to hearing is how people are impacted by the air quality in Ithaca, how they were impacted by the floods recently, or how they're dealing with the heat. And with pinpointing climate justice communities that are the most impacted. And then we're also looking forward to spreading information about what's happening at the city level. We know that there are public meetings that are available to everybody, but people don't necessarily have the time or the ability to necessarily understand all the regulatory information. And as an organization, we'd like to bridge that gap between the local government and the people. And another way we're looking towards to do that is to get more data collection, because we know numbers are a great tool to convey to our government what is happening and what the people want. We have a member that also created a community input survey, which has plenty of questions regarding Justice 50, the Ithaca Green New Deal, and also just space for folks to express what they feel and what they need and what their concerns are on the current state of the IGND. Can go on to the next slide. So another campaign that Sunrise is working on is the Green New Deal for schools. We're not necessarily working on a specific one as Sunrise Ithaca, but this is something that Sunrise National is working on getting to be enacted in different hubs and chapters. So obviously schools are the hearth of change. The future generations come out of schools, and if we want to see climate justice in the future, we need to build that in the schools, and we need to give power to the youth. That's something that's very important to Sunrise. And so how can that look like in high schools, for example? That could be free healthy meals, having strong climate curriculums available to all, and building sustainable infrastructures within schools. And then we also like to look at that from the college level. So that can mean divesting the endowment from fossil fuel and investing in local communities. And so in Ithaca, one major issue is Cornell not paying property taxes. And so we've been involved in the Free Cat campaign before, which demands that Cornell pays for free cat. And right now there is talk going on about holding Cornell more accountable for the pilot program that is not enough, and getting negotiations. And so here's also an event coming up on August 2nd. There's going to be a common council, and the Ithaca DCA invites you to comment on the pilot program and holding Cornell accountable. And then also there is Sunrise LACS, which is a school hub in Ithaca, and they had launched an ICSD GND, but that's not been completed as of now. But that's something that we have in mind, and we will be working and getting these ideas within our schools. Next slide, please.
So thank you. And sort of as a little bit of context to what Isia is saying is that sort of historically, as Sunrise Ithaca was operating, was very separated from the Sunrise national level work. And sort of we operated as our own organization that did work very independently and formed our own campaigns. But recently there's been a lot more members who have been interested in getting involved in the Sunrise national works, and they're redoing their structure, as Isia mentioned. So that's been shifting a little bit of trying to incorporate some of the national level work into our own work here in Ithaca. So if you're interested in providing support to Sunrise and the work that we're doing, one of the big things is, participating in public comments specifically geared towards Justice 50, either at the Common Council meetings or Sustainability and Climate Justice Advisory Commission meetings, and making it clear to Common Council that implementing Justice 50 is a priority and we can't continue to push it back. Other big things is just continuing to prioritize equity, as I know all of these organizations are focused on in the work that we do in the environmental justice sphere, thinking about the ways that tenants are being impacted by our work, thinking about the ways that community of color are involved in our work and need to be considered in it. I think that as the a lot of environmental work is often centered around technical solutions, and we need to be very mindful of thinking about ways that communities are also implicated in these. And attending events when we host them. So the Ithaca DSA has a public comment that they're organizing for the next Common Council meeting. We try to send out announcements when Sunrise is hosting meetings and rallies as well. So it would be great if we could have people from other organizations show up to events when we host them. And that is the end of my presentation. So I don't know if people have any questions or things that they wanted to chat about based on what they heard.
Thanks, Siobhan and Sia. It was great to catch up with the activities of Sunrise Ithaca, and also to get a glimpse of what's happening at the national level. I know earlier this week, the National Sunrise Movement folks had a gathering in Washington, D.C. focused on labor. And that struck me as very interesting because obviously there have been some very significant labor activities this summer, some of which have been quite successful. So I was just wondering how the local hub might be more involved around that issue as well.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think that labor is a huge component of what climate justice means. In the past, we had attempted to provide support by showing up for the Starbucks workers when they were holding their rallies and they were holding their strikes. So obviously it's something that we're very supportive of. I know that last summer when we were talking about the climate emergency, there was conversations about trying to involve local labor unions in that. And just didn't feel like we had enough time to build meaningful enough relationships in order to make that ask. But it's definitely something that we're cognizant of and always wanting to incorporate where possible.
One of the things that I wasn't totally clear about is the extent to which there are members of Sunrise Ithaca on the Climate Justice Advisory Commission.
Well, I'm going to be on the Climate Justice Advisory Commission.
Good.
So there is a representative from Sunrise, and as I understand it, there are still a few seats open. So I'm not sure if other members are going to be interested in applying or not, but there will be at least me sitting on the commission. Well,
that'll be a lot. We know that you'll be a terrific representative for the commission. So Rebecca, I bet you aren't surprised to hear that I wanted to ask you how you viewed all of this, given that you were there at the dawn of creation working with the students.
What do you want me to talk about? Yeah, it was accurate.
Yeah, just your perspective on watching Sunrise Ithaca take root and grow since you were first involved.
Yeah, I think COVID was disruptive to activism in general, and particularly to Sunrise. I think a lot of the really critical relationship building that's necessary to make a strong activist group. We were missing out on that for a couple of years, and I think that was very damaging. But it is nice to see that students are still pulling it along and making things happen, and try to support them in the ways that I'm able to do that. But yeah, it's nice to see that it's still going and still interested in the Green New Deal, certainly. So yeah, it's nice.
You want to just give us just a brief overview of the Climate Justice Advisory Commission and what stage that's at and the extent to which you'll be moving forward on that front?
Sure. So we're appointing 2 new members at the August, well, the mayor will be appointing 2 new members at the August Common Council meeting, both of whom are actually on this call. Siobhan is one and Aaron Fernando is the other. So we're getting some more young people on the commission, which I think is really, really critical, and specifically renters, so that we can have that perspective as, you know, we start to analyze policy and recommend things to common council. Right now, I believe that we are a full commission, or will be hopefully next month. Nick Goldsmith is hoping to join with Park Foundation approval, and if and when that happens, we will have a full commission. And David Kay, who's also on this call, is the chair. I don't know, David, if you want to say anything about the commission. Oh, there you are.
I could. Firstly, it's great news that we're actually going to have a full commission, and welcome to those folks who are joining the commission. I really look forward to working with you. You know, in the sense, like, I think time is our biggest enemy. Everybody's so busy. The commission has a really big agenda, you know, to some extent led by Rebecca, and I mean, I feel like in some ways we don't meet often enough to really, certainly to like address the agenda that's really big in front of us. You know, Peter, I mean, as a commission, we've never met as a full commission, you know, I would say. So we have had a couple meetings with those who were already appointed, addressing specific topics, you know, that the city through Rebecca and the planning department have sort of like tried to get us up to speed to. But I think that really what we're, as a group, we're still kind of trying to get to know each other and understand what the top priority agendas for the city are. We're an advisory body, of course, and we don't have decision-making authority over things, but like, you know, I think Rebecca in particular in the planning department, you know, I think are clearly going to take us, you know, our advice very seriously. And I think that we have a lot of work to do. And I was really thrilled you know, to hear about particularly some of the outreach work that you guys were talking about, because I think that our commission really has kind of 2 fundamental functions in city law. One of them is to sort of be I don't know, like a technical advisory group to the city, providing technical feedback based on areas of expertise we have. But the other one is to really try and be a connection between government and the people who are affected by the policies. So and frankly, the first part for most people just means showing up at monthly meetings and providing feedback after having done our homework. The second part could be an endless task, like how do we really connect as well as we can to all the people that live in the city in fundamental ways. So I think we need to figure out exactly what our role is, and certainly connecting to existing organizations like Sunrise that are active in the community and have connections with people in the community is like really important. I'm not sure we even have, I mean, this is just me speaking personally, is like, I think that we need to think harder sort of structurally about how we want to do that second job in collaboration with, with other organizations and common council, which ultimately, has the authority to make sort of policy decisions. So anyway, that's what I would say.
Yeah, and it just to piggyback, the commission has met twice thus far. The first meeting was just sort of an orientation. In the last meeting, we took a look at CCA and the climate action plan. got some really, really good feedback on the climate action plan, which is exactly what we were hoping for. We have a lot of different areas of expertise, which was very intentional on the commission. But what is typical for areas of expertise, it's also very siloed in the sense that there's still a lot of education to do to bring all commission members up to speed on what's going on. And, you know, of the 300 different acronyms that we use on a daily basis, what do they mean? So yeah, I think it's going to be a learning curve, but even just in the short amount of time that we've already met, it has already been very, very helpful, and we've gotten some really good guidance. So I'm hopeful that will continue. And yeah, David is our chair, by the way. I don't know if I mentioned that. So David is the czar of the commission at this point.
I reject that term.
I knew he was gonna do that. That's funny. So predictable. How about the font of some significant wisdom? Is that okay, Dave?
Whatever you prefer to do on your own is fine, Peter.
So Jaden, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to second, David, I really appreciate you pointing out that the advisory group has to focus on that second element. And I think that that's kind of where a lot of these meetings and the boards, again, I'm new to Ithaca and I'm new to working with Block Power, but I'm kind of noticing that a lot of, we have a lot on our agendas for these meetings, and we kind of should be focusing a little bit more on how we can find small synergies outside of these meetings. And especially what I like about what Sunrise just presented is that they're really making sure that their core piece is getting out into the community. And that's like on the number one thing on their mind. So I would love to talk more about how the committee eventually does grow to kind of understand that second piece more. And I think it'd be helpful for everybody on this call to maybe, just provide support with that. And again, use our resources as well, however we can.
Thanks, Jaden. So Siobhan and Isia, I know that one of the things that Cornell and IC have focused on in terms of their efforts is to really make some pretty significant headway in terms of the development of solar energy and getting those two campuses connected to some pretty large scale PV systems in the area. One of the things that I've wondered about for quite some time now is why isn't the ICSD more involved in moving in this direction, and to what extent do students at the high school level in particular think about trying to get ICSD to take some more significant steps than they have already?
I'm not exactly sure, but I think IC and Cornell have a lot more funding and money than ICSD to do so. But yeah, you could also say that there is a lack of pushing for that within ICSD. There has been some very not small projects, but for example, we have some of the elementary schools, they have composting programs. But yeah, that's my answer.
Yeah, Sarah, why don't you go ahead?
Yeah, thanks. I think anyone that's been involved in trying to move forward with a larger scale DER distributed scale project, 5 megawatts or less, or, a larger, like truly large scale project, the wholesale transmission kind of story. It's not easy and it takes a lot of persistence. And so there's just sort of there's a big hurdle there just in terms of, having the resources, time and energy, to get organizationally smart about the options. That applies to everybody. And then I think for, the schools that are, needing to follow the state procurement rules, my experience with our higher ed consortium and the SUNY procurement process adds just another layer of challenge in terms of the bureaucracy and the timing and what you can do and all the approvals and the timeline, which I think is if I can sort of leave out a lot of details and summarize, the trying to contract between projects and big bureaucracies that move on really different timelines is super challenging. As well, some of the policy hurdles that New York State is working hard, to evolve and change, still make it really hard for folks, in the voluntary market to engage in a really significant way. So I see lots of reasons why it's super challenging for a school district to get that done.
Yeah, I think it is. I just wonder to what extent we could make some progress on that front, particularly with the new incentives involved with the Inflation Reduction Act.
Yep. There's a group. Are you all familiar with the Green New York Council? That's it's chaired by Nasturda, and it's one of the committees anyway that I'm helping with is how to help the state agencies, which I believe the school district would count as. Somebody can correct me if I'm wrong. How are they going to comply with like the Executive Order 22, which requires state agencies to use 100% renewables by 2025, I think, among other things. So potentially, our local district, I'm not aware that they have anyone on that team representing like K-12 school districts. That might be an interesting, option for folks to get involved with and, kind of really help steer NYSERDA, who, they try so hard, but they aren't necessarily boots on the ground frontline, trying to get things done and understanding the barriers that we face. So that's a potential suggestion if someone wants to get involved with that.
Yeah, thanks. David.
Well, I don't know. I was just gonna sort of point out, I think, what everybody who moves back and forth between sort of the outsider activist kind of approach to things, and then like starting to be an insider in certain ways, which I've certainly done in several ways, and probably many other people have, is that I think you do need, there's always like complexities, massive complexities in trying to get some kind of institutional change. And it's very difficult. I mean, I've been trying to, as most people here, we've been trying to work on this for some years now, related issues around climate change and energy transitions. And I can tell you, like, the things I don't know about what I'm trying to do about the systems I'm working with are still vastly larger than what I do know. Like trying to understand the electricity grid and, some of the things that Sarah was just alluding to could be a full-time job in and of itself, and it is for some people, so like, all I'm really trying to say is, like, I do think that despite all of that complexity, the deeper into it, the more you need to learn about to sort of really understand how change happens in these systems. It's almost the more important it is to have people pushing who don't have that complex, necessarily start with that level of complexity, pushing on the systems to make progress, like the school district, and then the second thing I just wanted to say, which I think Sarah was also alluding to is that, this is not being made in a vacuum. I mean, there are state and federal level policies that are essentially, well, they may or may not be focused specifically on particular parts of the system, like the school district. In every way, the school system is part of the change that, the state, for example, the state needs to make to meet its state climate goals. So like, they need to be paying more attention than they are. And they need, the way I think about it always is this is like a huge lift for everybody and support. I think of it in terms of supporting systems to make change as much as I do in terms of like pushing them to make change. I mean, it needs to have both, but they need support as well as pushing. So.
Yeah, I mean, I think one way to make this a little bit more focused would be just to see what the options are for installing a PV system on the roof of the Ithaca High School. That's something I know that from my work as a board member at New Roots, I know that's something that can be done, and it would send, I think, a really important signal to the students at the high school. I'm obviously, pushing my own agenda here, but I just think students need to feel like they are connected to some fairly concrete dimension of the energy transition, and that could be one way to do it, short of going full-blown utility scale solar for the entire school district. I would just love to see students at the high school put a little more pressure on the district along those lines. So, food for thought. Any other questions today?
Could I just make one other comment?
Sure.
Which is, I'm totally on board with, in some ways, I'm maybe not 100% on board. This is my qualification to what you just said, Peter, which is, I was already super impressed with the Sunrise presentation about the scope of work that they're doing already. I think what you just said is a great idea, but I would also say, there's too much to do, and like figuring out, what you're good at and can have impact in as an organization is also really important. So I'm sure that Sunrise and anybody else who might get involved will take that into account. And I don't know what the right thing for them to do is. So.
Yeah, I'm just throwing that out there.
Right.
But, just to reinforce what you just said, David, I am very impressed with the plans that Siobhan and Isia have outlined for us today. And there's a whole nother dimension, it sounds like to me, and Siobhan and Isia, correct me if I've got this wrong, but it seems to me like there's also going to be new effort to coordinate between the local and the national, and that there's some pretty significant plans at that level as well. So I'm sure that's going to take up some time and energy. I guess just one last question for Siobhan and Sia. How do you go about recruiting young people for Sunrise Ithaca? Is it primarily outreach through social media? Any showing up at other meetings that involve young people, or what's your approach there?
I will say that, during COVID and especially the prevalence of Zoom meetings, recruitment was quite challenging, as I'm sure everyone here has found. A lot of our new recruitment has come out of Ithaca High School and LACS. The students there are so excited and involved, and you know what you're talking about with the solar project might not necessarily be something that Sunrise takes on, but there are also a lot of groups at the high school specific level. I think IHS has like they've changed acronyms, but it's like some sort of green team. I don't remember what GOAT stands for, Isia. But they're doing like work in the environmental scope at their school. So that's perhaps something that they might be interested in. I'm not sure. But yeah, a lot of the recruitment has been focused on the high school, and I'm also personally hoping to do more outreach with the college students. I'm currently one of the only college students that are involved in Sunrise, and it would be great to have more of the Cornell and IC folks get back involved and try to find ways to, you know, reintegrate those communities. Cornell sort of exists as this entity that sits on the hill and doesn't often interact with Ithaca. And I think it's important to have people who are able to sort of bridge that gap. So yeah, a lot of it has been direct conversations with people. We are also very fortunate that people have heard of Sunrise and send us emails telling us they're excited and would like to meet with us, and trying to make sure that we get those people connections. I don't know if you have anything to add, Isia.
Yeah, I think that's good. But we do going to events, for example. There was an IHS Climate Expo and we were there. And we've done tabling at events too. And that is one way for which we recruit people.
Okay, well, thanks so much for getting us up to speed.
Hey, Peter,
this-
can I just
Yeah,
in
sure,
with
Sarah.
a real quick plug for the NISAC conference this fall? I just forwarded an email to you, Peter, with information about a youth event. I think
Right.
that the Sunrise team are already involved, but just wanted to put in a plug for that to help engage interested youth throughout the area in one place gathering.
Yeah, thanks for pointing that out, Sarah. I should have made that connection myself. So I'm glad you did. And I think that's on the second day of the conference, but I do think that's a great opportunity for young people in the area to connect up, not just with each other, but with the larger environmental and climate justice community that'll be gathered in Ithaca during that time. And I would want to encourage everyone here to go ahead and register. I sent some information out earlier this week about that with a link to the registration. And I think it's a terrific opportunity for all of us to come together and discuss the various issues that really are facing us, not just as a community, but as a state. So just one last plug, Siobhan and Isia, I hope you're also reaching out to the students at New Roots. I obviously, as a co-founder of New Roots and ongoing board member, have a particular interest in seeing that happen. I've been pushing the administration at New Roots to make sure students are involved in that conference as well. So just one more request from me to throw into the pot. But thanks so much for being here this morning, and good luck with your work going forward. And please do keep us posted. I'm more than happy to pass on information to the gang here. We have a pretty big distribution list, and it could be a good way for you to get out the word as well. So thanks again.
Thank you, Peter, and thank you for letting us share with all of you what we're working on.